Torah portion. The teaching, there are a few teachings that I want to give over. One is from one of my teachers at the Hartman Institute, named Donnie Segel, who's a dear and sweet teacher who I hope we can bring to Bethel. And he sent us a teaching before Shabbat from Jerusalem that I thought was very beautiful. Of course, now I don't have my Rashi with us, but I think I can remember what he said. The beginning of the Torah portion, it begins, Vayikra el Moshe, that God called to Moshe, Vayidaber Adonai, and God, Elav, and God spoke to Moshe. So God called to Moshe, God called to Moshe and spoke to him, Vayidaber Adonai Elav, and spoke to him, Me'ohel Moed, from the tent of meeting, Lemor, saying. And what Rashi notices is that in this span of this first verse, you have three different verbs for speaking or talking or calling. So you have Vayikra, God called to Moshe, and then God spoke to him, and then from the tent of meeting, saying. And Rashi says, before any of the diburim, before any of the speaking, before any of the amorim, any of the sayings, before any of the tzivuim, any of the commandments, because what's to follow are all of the commandments, there is kadmat kri'ah, which Rashi calls lashon chiba, that before any of the speaking and the talking and the commandments, there's calling, okay, which Rashi says is lashon chiba, which means it is the language of love, the language of affection. And Donnie pointed out that in a traditional yeshiva, this is the first, the traditional yeshiva begins the education of young children with the book of Leviticus. And there are many reasons for why that is the case. One of the rabbis say that just as the sacrifices purify us, it is children who are pure, and so there's a match of content to the material. But Donnie Segel says he imagines that Rashi, in commenting this way on the first verse that children are going to be learning in Cheder, in school, that what Rashi is doing is actually speaking to the teachers. And he's saying to the teachers, before you get into all of the commandments, before you get into all of the speaking, all of the details, all of the content, you first have to do this thing called kri'ah. You first have to, which is a language of love. And what Donnie said, it's so meaningful, I think, for this time, is you first have to just check in, right? You have to go around and take attendance. But when you're taking attendance, you're not just, sort of checking off, is this person here or not? You are checking in with each student. You're looking at their face, and maybe taking a moment to see how they are doing, to be with them in their whole person. The rabbis express this idea in another way. They say, derech eretz kadma laTorah, that prior to Torah, prior to learning Rashi and Hebrew and commentaries and Talmud, you have to have derech eretz. And derech eretz is just a way of, it means literally the way of the land, the way of the world. It's a way of walking through the world. You have to be a good person. And in this time, I read a beautiful article. We studied it actually as a staff. There was an article that came out on E-Jewish philanthropy called Contact Before Content. And even right now, I want to acknowledge that we're sort of putting content out there in the world. Let's do a class online. Let's do Kabbalat Shabbat online. Let's do Shacharit online. And all of these things. But I will say that some of the most meaningful work that that I have done as a rabbi, and that I think our community has done as a community, has been just trying to call and check in on people. I know that our board reached out to everybody in the community, tried to leave messages and talk to people voice to voice. And I know so many of you are reaching out to other people. And I can't emphasize enough how important that checking in with each other is. We are offering a Zoom Seder for Pesach out of this tremendous commitment, and it's so difficult this year. We normally do Seder hosting where we match people up, and both of those come from a commitment that no person should be alone on Passover evening. And this year that is so difficult. And so I just want to encourage us to use whatever the phone technology, to use the internet, the Zoom, and to go for walks, and to keep our social distance, which of course we have to do to stay safe, but to just check in with each other, because that is really the prelude to all of the Torah that we learn in the world. I'll just share a couple other teachings, and then after these teachings, we'll say a Mishaberach. We'll say a prayer for healing for those in our community, and then we will finish up with our Musaf. But a second verse that I want to just read to you. So verse 2 of the Torah portion, Daber el bnei Yisrael. See, there's so many good teachings. I want to share with you one other thing. And we don't have the Torah open, but I want you to know that the word Vayikra, if you have a Chumash somewhere, you may see that in the word Vayikra, the Aleph is written very small. Okay, the Aleph is written very small, and my favorite commentator, the Kli Yakar, brings one reason why the Aleph is small. Of course, I told you that this is the first verse that kids learn, and the Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And again, I think speaking to teachers, the Kli Yakar says, She'ein halimud, actually I take it back, maybe speaking to the teachers, but also speaking to the students too. She'ein halimud mitkayem ki'im b'mi shemaktin et atzmo. That learning only gets absorbed or finds ground in the world, mitkayem, in someone who maktin et atzmo, who, because the Aleph is small, he's saying that a person has to diminish him or herself. We have to diminish ourselves when we if we want learning to really take. And I think for students, there is a difficult piece, but it really is the beginning of all learning. That diminishment is saying, acknowledging, I don't know everything. There are things that I can learn. And I would say that's actually not a diminishment when it can feel like a diminishment to say there's something that I don't know that I need to learn from outside of myself. But the truth is that when we do that temporary diminishment, we actually open ourselves up to a far larger world, and to the greatness of everything that there is out there. And so it really emphasizes the role of humility. All right, let me go on to the second verse, and then we'll finish up. Daber el bnei Yisrael. So God says to Moshe, speak to the people, Israel v'amarta alehem, and say to them, and this is the first of those commandments about sacrifices in the book of Vayikra. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban la'Adonai. So a person, okay, but we're going to come back, Adam, which of course it means person, a human being, but also has echoes of Adam and Eve, of Adam, the first human being. Ki yakriv mikem, when a person yakriv sacrifices, I want you to know that the word korban, yakriv, is the same word as karov, which means close. So a sacrifice is something that brings us close to God. A sacrifice is something that brings us, when we make a sacrifice for someone else, it brings us close to community. It brings us close in the relationship. If we make a sacrifice by contributing to the community, it brings us close. So when a person from, and here I'll say y'all, okay, mikem, from you, but the plural you, brings a korban la'adonai, brings a sacrifice for God, min habehema, min habakar, from the herd or from the flock, umin hatzon, from the herd, from the cattle, from the flock, takrivu et korbanchem. You, in the plural, should bring your sacrifices. So some of the commentators notice that it begins, Adam is a singular, and the verse ends with the plural. And so that's one question that we're going to talk about, and then also this idea of Adam. So the Kliyakar, it wants to understand. He immediately, when he's trying to explain why does it go from the singular to the plural, he gives a couple of answers, but he ultimately says that it's a hint back to the singular is each one of us, but when each one of us brings a lesson, we have to remember the two mistakes that Cain and Abel made when they brought the first sacrifices. Okay, so we're talking about sacrifice, and the first sacrifice that we have recorded in the Torah is Cain and Abel. And of course, that story didn't go very well. And what the Kliyakar says about Cain is that Kikain nichshal, he was tripped up, b'mashe hevi min hapachot v'hagarua, v'hu zera pishtin. So Cain's offering, if you remember, was rejected very painfully by God, and according to the rabbis, the reason that it was rejected is that he brought from sort of the least and most terrible of his stuff, which was flax. Okay, and that is going to be compared to Hevel, who brings an animal, and so there was a sense that Cain, when he was making a sacrifice, he did make a sacrifice, but he didn't give what he was able. He didn't give of his best. He sort of, and so that's one mistake. And then the other thing that we're supposed to learn, according to the Kliyakar, is that Hevel, afal pi shehevi mi bichorot sono, even though Hevel brought from the firstlings of his flock, mikol makom lo tov asa, nevertheless it wasn't good. Shelo nitarer el hakorban me'atzmo. He went second. He only brought a korban because he saw Cain bring a korban. V'lo nisares lamitzvah zo me'atzmo. It didn't come from his own inspiration. It came basically, he saw, oh, my brother did it, I should probably do that too. And so the Kliyakar is saying what we learn from the fact that it goes from the singular to the plural is that he's teaching a very he's teaching a very deep lesson about how it is that we should give, to God, and how it is that we should give to, in our relationships, to the people we love and to our community and to the world, which is that ideally we will first of all, that we should give ideally, not because we see everybody else doing it, but we want to create within ourselves a deep motivation to give of ourselves to others. We know Maimonides, ladder, look, in fundraising, what they say is that, most people give because they're asked. And that's true. It's true. Most people, you need to be asked in order to awaken that giving. But we know that if we're in a relationship and the person who we deeply care about, if we need to ask for things, when they give it, it still is helpful and it's still meaningful, but it's very different when we have to ask. And so the Kli Yakar is saying we can first of all learn from Hevel, from Abel, that when we give, it should be something that comes. We want to train ourselves to be people who give to others. I want to say in this time, there are so many doctors, so many nurses, so many people who are on the front lines of fighting the coronavirus, but so many teachers and so many people delivering meals, and so many people in so many different ways who are not waiting to be asked, but just giving of themselves. And that second lesson that we learn from Cain is that we should give of our best. That we that actually, and giving of our best is knowing that it's actually what we give away that is eternal. And so we shouldn't say to ourselves, well, I'm going to keep the best for me, because that's what really matters, but I'll also give to others. The Kli Yakar is saying, no, it's actually what we give away is what is eternal and what lasts. What we give to other people, that should be the best. I think those are some wonderful and important lessons from our Torah portion. And my prayer, I know that the way in which we will not only make it through to the other side of this moment for our community and this moment for our world, I do have faith that we will. And one of the ways that I find that faith is by seeing the way in which we give to each other.